Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we're diving into the fascinating, highly poetic, and incredibly intense ancient texts of Jeremiah chapters 1 and 2. We are going to unpack this prophet's really dramatic calling, along with his striking, absolutely no-holds-barred indictments of a nation teetering right on the brink. This text is a literal masterclass in ancient literary structure and evocative imagery, and we're going to break it all down so you can truly grasp the raw power behind these words. Let's get into it.
All right, here's our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at 1. The call to prophecy, 2. Visions of the north, 3. The broken cisterns, 4. Metaphors of betrayal, and 5. The cost of vain alliances.
Starting with Section 1, the call to prophecy.
Right off the bat, the very first verses drop us into a seriously turbulent, high-stakes moment in history. You see, this isn't just some vague spiritual poem. It's anchored in a very real, very specific time. The narrative spans the reigns of the final Judean kings. It starts in the 13th year of Josiah, pushes right through Jehoiakim, and hits a devastating climax in the 11th year of Zedekiah. And look at that final point, the 5th month, when Jerusalem is ultimately exiled. So from the very first sentence, we know for a fact this story is heading toward absolute catastrophe.
Now, what I find so fascinating here is Jeremiah's immediate, totally relatable reluctance. When he's tasked with this enormous responsibility, he doesn't just boldly accept the mission like a typical hero. Instead, he highlights his own inadequacy. He cries out that he doesn't even know how to speak, claiming he's just a youth. It's this profound, really beautiful moment of human vulnerability right at the start of such a heavy epic.
But then, look at the powerful contrast in God's response. He completely brushes past Jeremiah's insecurity and drops this sweeping cosmic truth. Jeremiah was chosen before he was even born. Literally, before he was formed in the belly, he was known and sanctified. He wasn't just being appointed as some local messenger, right? He was established as a prophet to the nations. This exchange completely validates the absolute, undeniable authority of the words Jeremiah is about to speak.
Let's move on to Section 2, Visions of the North.
Okay, so here is where the narrative takes a really sharp turn. We move away from the biographical stuff, and the stakes are suddenly raised through some highly symbolic, really striking visual language. God basically asks Jeremiah, "What do you see?" and presents him with two distinct, honestly jarring visions.
So how do these rapid-fire symbols actually work within the story? First, Jeremiah sees the staff of an almond tree. Now, the text explicitly tells us this signifies that God is hastening to fulfill his word, meaning action is imminent. Then we get a deeply unsettling image, a bubbling, boiling pot with its spout facing north. This represents an overflowing evil that's going to be released upon all the inhabitants of the land, specifically kingdoms of the north coming to place their thrones right at Jerusalem's gates. Finally, the text delivers the divine command. Faced with all this impending doom, Jeremiah is told to literally gird his loins, stand up and speak without fear, because if he's frightened, he will be broken before them.
Bringing us to Section 3, the broken cisterns.
This breakdown brilliantly illustrates just how deep the systemic rot goes. It is a complete, top-down institutional failure. The priests, the spiritual guides, didn't even bother to ask, "Where is God?" The teachers of the Torah literally did not know him. The shepherds, meaning the political rulers, actively rebelled. And the prophets themselves, they were prophesying by Baal, chasing after things that are totally useless. Every single pillar of their society is just systematically dismantled here.
To really hammer home this absolute societal collapse, the text gives us this incredible duality. It powerfully juxtaposes the endless, life-giving nature of God, described as the source of living waters, against the totally useless, self-made, broken cisterns of idolatry. Just think about the sheer foolishness being described here for a second. It's like abandoning an infinite, fresh spring of water just to go dig holes in the dirt that are cracked and can't even hold water anyway. It is a true masterpiece of rhetorical tragedy.
Which leads us to Section 4, Metaphors of Betrayal.
Here we get the tragic narrative arc of Israel laid completely bare. Initially, the text recalls the kindness of their youth, the pure love of your nuptials, faithfully following into a harsh, unsown wilderness. It's a beautiful, intimate picture. But then, the tone violently shifts. The text accuses them of breaking their yoke, bursting their straps, and wandering like a harlot upon every lofty hill and under every leafy tree. The pristine, devoted bride has become utterly unrecognizable.
Then, the author just rapid-fires these striking, super visceral metaphors to show how wild, uncontrollable, and totally unnatural this rebellion really is. They were planted as a choice, faithful vine, but somehow magically turned themselves into an inferior alien weed. They're described as a young camel just erratically careening around, and a wild donkey in heat, desperately sucking in the wilderness air, completely impossible to restrain. And perhaps the most condemning part? The text declares their guilt is a permanent stain. It says even if they scrub themselves with niter and huge mounds of soap, the iniquity is just deeply, permanently ingrained.
And you know, the sheer absurdity of this rebellion is just perfectly captured in this specific accusation. The text describes the people turning their backs on their true source, only to look at a piece of wood and say, "You are my father, and to a rock you have borne us." It's this really dark irony exposing utter intellectual and spiritual bankruptcy. And yet the kicker is, when distress hits, these same people will hypocritically turn around and scream for salvation.
Finally, let's look at Section 5, the cost of vain alliances. The text actually calls out the geopolitical maneuvering of the time directly. It asks, what is there for you on the road to Egypt to drink the waters of the Nile? And what is there for you on the road to Assyria to drink the water of the Euphrates? They've completely abandoned their own living waters, and now they're desperately running off to foreign superpowers trying to quench their thirst with foreign rivers. It's a futile chase.
So this all builds into this inevitable tragic sequence. Step 1. They seek foreign alliances for protection, leaning heavily on Egypt and Assyria. Step 2. Because they've forsaken their true foundation, they end up experiencing nothing but bitterness. Essentially, their own waywardness ends up chastising them. And step 3 is the devastating conclusion. They emerge in absolute shame. They're shamed by Egypt just as they were by Assyria, because God has outright rejected these earthly guarantors. The message is clear. Political alliances built on spiritual betrayal are entirely doomed.
We're going to end on this beautiful, incredibly provocative thought straight from the text. It asks, can a maiden forget her jewelry, a bride her adornments? I mean, the obvious answer is no, right? It's unthinkable. Yet the text delivers this haunting punchline. Yet my people have forgotten me for days without number. It really leaves us to ponder some timeless and honestly haunting themes: the fragility of loyalty, the sheer tragedy of misplaced trust, and the profound sorrow of forgetfulness. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.